Listen, I am not a sports guy. I don't want, okay, I told you that you don't expect sport illustrations. When I do pull them out, just expect them to be weird because I don't watch sports. Or I did not watch sports, but then something weird started happening. I started watching sports like 2 months ago. Actually started with NASCAR like 4 months ago, hoping to watch some crashes. There's something peaceful about watching cars just go around in loops, and every once in a while there'll be like an explosion or something. And yesterday I was cruising the channels, all 12 of them. 6 were dedicated to God, 4 to Spanish speaking, and then 2 that I could pick from. And there were sports on, and I turned them on just so I could take a nap. And so I watched sports to rest and to sleep. And within the Ole Miss game, they were playing some other football team. It took about 5 minutes and I was out. And then the Jehovah's Witness decided they need to knock on my door. Regardless, that's not the point. They were playing Arkansas? Yeah, then there was some other college team playing somewhere in the TV. Listen. Guys, this is serious stuff. And so, man, we have we stereotype sports people. Like, if you watch sports, you probably drink beer and you get loud. I'm snoozing. But there's something that is, Wally alluded to this a few weeks ago about sports. I was actually watching, my wife will dress me up in her Detroit Lions gear. And it's the most embarrassing thing. Well, it really pushes me as a man as I'm walking through public with a Detroit Lions shirt on and the guys come up like, "Did you see the game? Whoa." I was just like, yeah. I got to bluff my way through it because I know there's like Stratford Point in there. Or there's another dude in there that wears blue and there's a big guy in there. And I just have no clue. And they just engage me as if like I'm there with them. And I just sweat the entire time, praying they don't see right through me. But so I was watching, back to my point, I was watching the Detroit Tigers play baseball. They're going after some world big thing. And I did not know that you have multiple pitchers, like not Kool-Aid pitchers, but like pitchers, you throw a ball, pitchers on the same team. There's like 4 or 5. In fact, the first game, I think, or second game, Detroit blew out the Red Sox. And then the next game, they put in a different pitcher who bombed it. And I said, Becca, why would they do that? The first pitcher did a great job. Keep him going. And she filled me in on the fact that he's probably hurting because he threw, I don't know how many pitches, but 7 innings of pitches, and he needs a rest. So you put in the next guy, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, dude, suck it up. We're winning because you're doing a good job. You all stay on the bench or in the dugouts or wherever you stay. And, and the bullpen, I thought that was a rodeo. But, okay, guys, I'm getting distracted real easily here. Okay, so they go back. Is it really a bullpen? Oh my gosh, it just gets more confusing. Okay, all right, I'm just going straight to the point. I hope to watch fights when I watch baseball. That's like really what I get out of it. Please fight, and will the fight ever end? Because sometimes there's like a lot of people jumping in. Okay, and you may think, well, that's sick and weird, but that's like the only exhilarating part of baseball for me. But you know what I never have seen? I'm sure it's happened. I'm sure I've seen it, or y'all have seen it, maybe Spilzer, ESPN top 10 plays or whatever, where the team fights each other, right? I've never seen it happen. I've never seen the pitcher go to the other pitcher and say, "You're terrible, get off the field." I don't see the catcher going to the pitcher, come on, pitch it. "Oh, you're terrible, bring in the backup." We don't see the team turning on each other because if they did, the team would break apart. You lose unity. In fact, part of the coach's job is to bring the team together. And, you don't see it. There was that thing in Miami, the incognito, I guess that was his name, and he's bullying his teammate, and we can bicker about that all day. Was it right? Was it wrong? Regardless, That's kind of odd that would, because that caused division in the team, and there's a break of unity. And the church, we are teammates on the same team, but tragically, over the years, the church has eroded because the team has turned on each other. Because we have seen each other at different levels, different spots in our journey, in our faith, and we tell each other, you can't be there. You need to you need to improve. You need to do better. How dare you talk to me like that, or whatever. And we begin dividing the team, if I can use that word, here in the church, because we've lost the mentality of unity through Christ. Paul is talking about this in Romans 14. In fact, he devotes what we would say an entire chapter, a huge section of this letter to the Christians in the Roman province to unity. How do you live with one another who are at different places in their faith? And notice he never says, or he never takes the time to decipher, is the weak person a believer or not? Or is this person that's living in liberty a believer or not? He assumes that both sides, both people have faith, and now he's going to the point of bringing them together. How do you live with someone who sees God a little bit differently? Whose faith enables them to do something where your faith would disable you in that area, or you would do something different in order to substantiate your faith. Last week we defined the weak a little bit. We said they were characterized by two things. One is there was a self-righteous attitude about them. The weak, Romans 14:1 says they were weak in faith. And so what did they do? They did two things, as Paul points out. They abstained from meat, and they adhered religiously to these special Jewish days, be it festivals, the Sabbath, or whatever it was. And on top of that, they were forcing their faith and what they were doing on other Christians. So there's one characteristic of the weak, is that I'm better than you. I got it figured out. And you need to follow my example. But buried in there, if we kind of dig a little bit deeper, we see that attitude is developed out of a heart that is doubting. That has at one point, or is currently, fearing God in an unhealthy way. God, I want to do more for you in order for you to accept me. I don't want you to be mad at me, so therefore I'm not going to touch meat out of fear of sinning, and I'm going to just eat vegetables. All right? I'm going to obey the Mosaic law when it comes to the Sabbath to a T, because I don't want to sin. I don't want to make you mad at me, God. And, maybe that's where you're at today. Your view of God is that he's a man upstairs with a frown. Always asking you to do more. Always asking you to do better. And so you try, and you try, and you try to no avail to yourself. The more you do, and the more you satisfy that little bit of disruption inside of you, the more it grows, and the more you feel like you have to do. And if that lie is left unanswered, then you will begin to become self-righteous, or you can become self-righteous. You can become the person with all the answers, and then we begin to judge each other. But interestingly enough, Paul never uses the word strong. I did not have a chance to edit your questions for this week. I prepared them 2 weeks ago, and I used the word weak and strong. In your community groups, strike out that word strong and find a different word for it. Paul never refers to people in this passage as strong. And if I do today, it's really a slip of the lip. And know that when I say strong, I'm talking to those who have developed, matured more in their faith in a way that gives them liberty to live as Christ has designed them to live. I believe Paul doesn't use the word strong on purpose because, one, if you're strong, you don't recognize it. There is a humility that is driving you, that it's just not on your radar. Oh, I'm strong. In fact, the weak person is the one who thinks they're strong because they can look at their lives and say, look at what I'm doing. I got it figured out. Where the strong person, it's just, in their humility, it's just not something that they're dwelling on. Where they're at with Christ, how mature they are. And so to use the word strong, I believe, can further divide the church if we don't use these words rightly. Let me just throw out a caution here real quick. Don't blindly follow those who you think are strong. Okay, don't just because I'm up here preaching, Mark's singing, or you got community group leaders that are facilitating a conversation at the house or whatever it is. Don't assume because of what we do, we are more mature in our faith. Because I think every one of us in here, our faith has doubt interwoven at some point, at some level, because we're human. And that is what we are, we're aiming to mature day after day, is that, I just fully learn to trust in God. And those doubts begin to melt away. But, so my caution is just because a person's life looks like it's put together, don't assume that it is together. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But today I want to talk about what is our response to each other. How do we accept each other? How do we play ball on the same, on the same team when we're at different levels? We're at different maturity points. We're at different journeys with our relationship with Christ. We're going to focus mainly on the weak's response to the strong. If you go to Romans 14, we're going to jump at verse 3, the second part of verse 3. And read through verse 4. It says, and let not the one who abstains, who is that? That's the person who is eating only vegetables because they're afraid. There's some fear, some doubt in them that if they eat meat, they're sinning against God. Let not the one who abstains pass judgment on the one who eats, for God has welcomed him. Who are you to pass judgment on the servant of another? It is before his own master that he stands or falls, and he will be upheld, for the Lord is able to make him stand. And for 2 weeks as I studied this, I was confused because I thought that it was the one who was more mature, farther along in their journey. I thought that person was the one who was going to judge the weak person, right? Because I thought that it was because they had it more together that they had a right to judge. And I actually wrote my sermon last week with that as my format. And I just kept scratching my head because I was reading it and I was getting all mixed up. It was the weak. It's the weak who judges the strong. Those who are at a different point in their journey of faith because they believe they've got it all together. They believe that they've got the answers. They believe that they're strong. What does it mean to judge? It does not mean to call out sin. All right, there is a point and there is a place in our relationship with God and as a church family that we sit down out of love with one another, and Scripture gives us guidelines on how to do this, where we say, hey, brother, sister, I just see this in your life. And we carry each other's burdens. But to judge, as Paul's using it here, means to condemn, to pronounce doom. It means to say you're not a Christian because of what you're doing. All right, that's what the weak will have a tendency to want to judge. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, or if you've experienced this. Maybe you've been on the receiving end of it, or maybe you're the one that judges, and you look at people and you say, they call themselves a Christian, But yet, look at the movies they go to. How can a Christian go watch that movie? How can someone who calls themselves a Christian spend money like that? How could they take on debt? Wait, you're dancing. I thought Christians don't dance. You're drinking. Christians don't drink. You see, and there's a judgment that happens from the weak that labels a person not a believer because of what they're doing. And we'll look more into this next week about what does it mean to have Christian liberty? What does it mean to live in freedom? But it's to pronounce doom. To judge means to condemn, to pronounce doom. Romans 14:3 says, as I read before, let not the one who abstains pass judgment on the one who eats. Why? For God has welcomed him. For God has welcomed him. Flip over to James chapter 4 and verse 12. I love this. It says this, there is only one lawgiver and judge. I'm going to just take a stab at this. It's not me and it's not you. I'm just thinking out loud, you know. If there's only one, my guess is you're not it. And if you think you're it, I think you're wrong. There's only one lawgiver and judge, he who is able to save and to destroy. I knew it wasn't you. But who are you to judge your neighbor? There will be a day where we will stand at the judgment throne. Jesus will say, I accept you, child, or I don't know you. Come on in, or get away from me. He is the only one who can judge. He is the only one who can save. And he is the only one who can destroy. Hey, roll back to Colossians 2. A few chapters to the left. Go to verse 16. Part of playing well together as a team, I know that waters down who we are as a church, but just to pull the sermon together, part of playing well together as a team is understanding that we are at different journeys, understanding that some will be weaker in their faith than you, understanding that some people will say things that will hurt you, right? And what does verse 16 say? Therefore, let no one pass judgment on you. In this instance, in questions of food and drink, or with regard to a festival, or a new moon, or a Sabbath. Those gray areas, right? Those areas that have no weight on your salvation. Let no one pass judgment on you. Does that mean you tackle them if the words are rolling out of their mouth? I'm not going to let you say it. I don't think so. I think what it means is that was a sport illustration too. We filter. We don't let those lies set in. When it says let no one pass judgment on you, people will say things. And they'll talk behind your back. And some of you know this because today you are filtering through some of this stuff. I had a dream last night. And a lady in my dream, this is what she said to me. She goes, "You're morally collapsing, Greg." And I was like, I woke up and I'm like, I'm morally collapsing. I'm like, I don't know what that means, but it sounds bad. And I've been wrestling with that this morning. She wasn't even real. Therefore, let no one pass judgment on you. I know. What do I need to do? I need to filter that lie. Right? Because in God's eyes, I'm not morally collapsing. I'm righteous. In God's eyes, you're not morally collapsing. You're righteous as his child. Let no one pass judgment on you means that even though you know people will say things and do things, you stand right in the Father's eyes. And you're going to remind yourself of that truth as those lies try to creep in, as Satan tries to creep in every little nook and cranny. He's going to try to twist God's words just a little bit to get you to believe that you're not good enough. Let no one pass judgment on you in questions of food and drink or with regard to a festival or a new moon or a Sabbath. Verse 17, these are a shadow of the things to come, but the substance belongs to Christ. Let no one disqualify you, insisting on asceticism and worship of angels, going on in detail about visions, puffed up without reason by his sensuous mind, and not holding fast to the head, which is Jesus Christ, from whom the whole body, nourished and knit together through its joints and ligaments, grows with a growth that is from God. I mean, that's critical here. Your efforts in becoming better in life are no good. They're no good. They lead to nothing, because your growth as a child of God comes from God himself. And he will sanctify you, 1 Thessalonians 5 says. He will complete it, and he will do it at his own pleasure. But he will mature you. Verse 20 goes on and says, if with Christ, so Paul flips here. He's talking to those who are further along in their faith in the first section. Now he flips to talk to those who are weak in their faith. Hey, he says, if with Christ you died to the elemental spirits of the world, why, as if you were still alive in the world, do you submit to regulations? Do not handle, do not taste, and do not touch, referring to things that all perish as they are used, according to human precepts and teachings. These have, verse 23, these have indeed an appearance of wisdom in promoting what? Self-made religion and asceticism and severity to the body. Hey, you may look good on the outside, but then he throws in this curveball, but they are of no value in stopping the indulgence of the flesh. What does that mean? I mean, you appear good on the outside, but he says at the end of the day, your desire to be obedient because you want to please God, I mean, that's who Paul's talking to, right? People who knew the Mosaic law, people who understood the law of God, and they were doing everything they could to please God. He says at the end of the day, all that work, it has no effect on your flesh. Right? I mean, you cannot subdue your flesh in your own power. But Greg, I mean, Paul, I mean, I don't want to lie, stop lying. I don't commit adultery, so I don't want to commit adultery, so I just make sure I don't do it. I don't murder, so therefore I don't do it. I mean, to me that seems like I'm constraining the flesh. But on the Sermon on the Mount, what does Jesus say? He says, you know, all that. The flesh is not just what we do. It's what we think, and it's who we are. It's our heart. And until the heart changes, you cannot restrain the indulgence of the flesh. Until the heart is changed by Jesus Christ, and as Galatians 2 says, and Jesus lives in you, you can't constrain, you can't shave off the desires of the flesh. And so adultery, Jesus says, well, if you lust after a woman in your own mind, you like committed adultery. And we take that out of context, and we think, well, oh, no, I just thought about this woman, therefore I've committed adultery. I'm terrible. No, I mean, sin has a progression. It has a lifespan. And adultery starts in the mind. And Jesus is saying that part of committing adultery is what goes on up here. And if you lose up here, then you've lost the battle. And therefore, that's why you can not commit the physical act of adultery, but you can lose up here, and you still lost in the flesh. There's therefore no adherence to the law, and trying to do what the law tells me to do can fix my heart, can fix who I am. That only comes from a relationship in Jesus Christ. So Paul says, hey, weak. Hey, those of you who are adhering to the law in order to feel because of doubt and you want to honor God by being obedient and doing good, you're trying to please God. He says, hey, don't judge those who have found more freedom in Christ. He's not saying stop it. He's just saying, hey, don't judge. But then he flips around. He says to those who are more mature in their faith, he says, and you, don't despise the one who's weak. Don't look down. Don't look on with contempt. Because here's what happens in a church. If we don't catch this up front, okay, for example, drinking is one of those things, right? Some churches just no drinking. Other churches, we have no regard. Okay, personally, drinking with me is one of those areas that I abstain from because there is some doubt intermingled. But I can sit with someone who's drinking. I took a sip of a Mike Hard's lemonade and I was out. Bam! Hungover for like 3 weeks. But part of this, guys, is when my first job at a church was a youth pastor job, and I saw the teens struggled with alcohol. I did not want to be a stumbling block to them. Also, and so, there's this, and when the day is rough, at the end of the day, I've never drinking anything outside of that sip of Mike's Hard lemonade. There's a craving for alcohol that's like, where's this coming from? Like, I need to blow off some steam, or I need to go unwind. I'm going to go get a beer. And I'm like, wait a second, I don't even know what this stuff tastes like. Why am I asking myself to go, let's go to a bar? And I know, I can't explain it. I just know that, okay, it's not for me. Don't even open that door. But I can sit with someone. But to an extent, for me, if I'm with you and you're starting to get drunk, I become uncomfortable. I feel awkward in the midst. And so therefore, here's what can happen. I can point to you and say, Christians shouldn't get drunk. Oh, no, let's back up a little bit. Christians shouldn't drink beer. What's my implication? You're not a Christian because you're drinking. And you being a little bit further maybe in your faith, you just like blow it off. Or maybe you got a couple beers in you, you're like, whatever. Watch the football game. I don't like football. I'm more about God, and you're clearly not following God. You're going back for a third round. Okay. You need to loosen up. You're like, what's going on? You always all self-righteous and stuff. Oh, see, I knew it. Christians don't call other Christians self-righteous. You're proving my point. You're just smug. Get out of my house. And what happens is we get into a circular kind of relationship where things begin to break down. And over the years, Midtown, the church's unity begins to slowly erode away. And before long, we've weeded out one sector. Those who are further along in their faith or those who are weak in their faith. And then the church becomes either labeled a smug, self-righteous church or a very loose, we don't care about what people do type of church. And there's a better way, and that is to learn to live with each other who are at different journeys in their faith, who are truly desiring to honor God with what they're doing. And this is the amazing part. This is where we have to lock in. Guys, what you're doing is out of a sincere desire to honor God. Why would I want to take that from you? Why would you want to take that from each other? Some of you're more strict in what you do because you think that's what honors God. And it does. It does honor God. And this is why God's not trying to change you. Paul's not trying to change you. And others of you, you can find honoring God in listening to country music or rock and roll. Well, some of you are just like, no, rock and roll's the limit, man. It's the limit. Well, see, right there. Right there. How do we live with each other who are at different places in their journey with God? And here it is. It's just to identify that you may have a tendency to judge, to condemn, or you may have a tendency to look down and to despise. And the answer is to see that we are on the same team and we both have one desire, and that is to glorify God through what we're doing. This is something I've had several conversations with some of you. What about this? What about the different interpretations of the gospel? Okay, I mean, kind of left field, but right in the church, we'll have 12 different versions of the same gospel. How do we live with each other then? I got the answer. I don't have the answer to that. I mean, this is why the Catholic Church says, you Protestants lost it. Should have just stayed with us. We had it all figured out. All right? And now each of you all don't even know what you're talking about. Well, the point is this. I believe that God has put things in the Bible like free will, predestination, election, depravity, grace, end times, and they're not to completely guide us, but to test us as a church. You know, there's a few nuggets that shouldn't change. And those are the ones that we just raise up the flag and we say, okay, how do we come to the Father? It's only through Jesus Christ. Repentance and belief in Him. When those things are jeopardized, then the whole system begins to fail. The whole belief structure, whatever you want to call it, begins to collapse. But we begin chomping on the peripheral items that really, guys, have no weight in the end. The only thing they're used for is by the enemy to begin destroying the church and splitting the church. As I was, we were singing, my heart was turning a lot about the last part of my sermon. I'm going to go back to verse 3 in Romans 14. This is just huge. The last 5 words, for God has welcomed him. Oh, man, what an amazing promise. God has welcomed you where you're at. You see, Paul is talking about that person who is a bit farther along in their faith and living by liberty, but that could be any one of us. We can't identify who is weak and who is farther along in their journey because, guys, I may be doing everything by Leviticus and still have faith, but I just have so much doubt. So everybody is a little bit farther along than me. God has welcomed him. God has welcomed him. Two more passages. 1 Corinthians 9. 1 Corinthians 9, 20 through 23. Very specifically, I want to go somewhere between this and Romans 8. Let me read this to you. Verse 22, the Jews, let me back up to verse 19. For though I'm free from all, Paul says, though my faith gives me freedom from the law, because he knows Christ has fulfilled the law, that the law has no weight on my righteousness. For though I am free from all, I have made myself a servant to all, that I might win more of them. More of who? This is really interesting. To the Jews, I became a Jew. Well, to those under the law, what law? The Mosaic law, those who knew the 10 Commandments, as one under the law, though not being myself under the law, that why? I might win those under the law. To those outside the law, I became as one outside the law, not being outside the law of God, but under the law of Christ. Why? For the third time, that I might win those outside the law. To the weak, I became weak. That is the same Greek word as Paul uses in Romans 14. Is he talking about believers? That I might win the weak for a fourth time. I have become all things to all people, that by all means I might save some. I do it all for the sake of the gospel, that I may share with them in its blessings. Here's what I think about what Paul is saying here. He's not worried about going out to non-believers and being all things to non-believers. He says, where I live my life, be it in the midst of believers or non-believers, I am going to be sensitive to the person around me and what is motivating them, what's motivating their faith, and I'm going to make sure that I do everything I can to be the gospel to them. In fact, he says, I'm going to use my freedom as a tool. He says, I'm free to become under the law, to be like those under the law. But he makes a distinction, says the law of Christ. I can become a Jew because my freedom allows me to become like a Jew to win those. I can become weak, all for the sake of the gospel, so that he can share in it, in the blessings of the gospel with each other. How amazing is that? What's the core of the gospel? What does it do? It's the good news that sets me and sets you free from your sin, from the bondage and corruption of your sin. And ultimately, it's the answer that puts us back to our pre-fall conditions, right? Before sin came into the world. The gospel is what sets us free. The gospel is what liberates us through Jesus Christ. I had a friend in youth group growing up. We were about 16 years old, and we went off to Ireland. And in Ireland, the teenagers, cussing was just part of their language, just part of their communication. And we were hanging out at the parks for 2 weeks, just getting to know the people at the parks, and he got to know a group of people. And he realized his cleaned up Christian language wasn't doing anything. They really kind of pushing people back. And so one day he devised this clever plan and said, I'll just start cussing. And then I'll be like them. They'll accept me, and then I can bring them the gospel. And so he did. And he, just like overnight, just started dropping these words. And I don't know if it worked for him. Now, I love the heart behind that. Okay, the tactic, the strategy maybe needs to be tweaked a little bit, but the heart behind it is I'm going to come to where this person is at to bring them the gospel, so that maybe one day I can share in the blessings of the gospel with this person. And at times I just wonder how awesome will we be as a church family if we surrender some of our rights to stoop down to the level of others. How cool would that be? That our unity is so tight that no erosion has crept in. But we're so tight because we get this. And the world sees it. And we're not tearing each other down as we're getting our coffee, or we're not judging each other for how you're spending your money or doing this or doing that. But you just understand that we're on the same team. We have one purpose. It's to glorify God in what we do. The band, you could come up. I want to close with Romans 8. This is what's been stirring in my heart the past about 45 minutes. It's my dream that I had last night. Okay, I don't really dream much, but this lady, and she's someone I knew. It's not fair for me to be dreaming about her and using her as an example. She never said it. My mind said it and put the words in her mouth. Greg, you are morally collapsing. All right, man, I just thought, that's so rich. It's got to be true. And I woke up believing it. And I couldn't shake it. Because I went to bed last night thinking that. You see, who's our biggest critic? to ourselves. That's what I've had so many conversations the past couple weeks and with myself about judging myself. How can God love you? Hey, if you're leading a community group, if you're up here on the stage talking to my wife, what are you saying? You flirting with my wife? I'm coming after you. If you are leading a community group, and if you're on the stage, you're out there greeting. You know, Satan wants nothing more than to begin to tell you that you're not good enough to do that. I can't, just me personally, I can't, the judgment that I've had on myself over the past 2 years, it just skyrocketed. And if you're doing something here in this church, hey, be it you're at home and you're just living your life for God and you want to show the world the love of God, or you're shaking a hand at the door, or you're flipping slides in the back, or you're watching our children, Satan wants to disqualify you through your own mind. And I know if you're anything like me, and if you're human, and you got a love for God, that somewhere inside of you, there's this tension. God, accept me. But I keep trying and I keep trying and I cannot get any closer. This is what I have to do. I have to go to Romans 8. Hey guys, the person to your left, the person to your right, the person in front of you, the person behind you, they're accepted by God if they believe in God. There's something going on in their life right now, and maybe it's huge. You may not even know it. We don't have to judge each other, because the condemnation can be so great just in and out of our own minds. What we need to do is wrap our arms around each other and say, hey, I accept you for who you are, and live out that gospel. Because the truth is this: there is therefore now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. You cannot condemn yourself. You can believe that you're condemned, but that doesn't mean you're condemned. For the law of the Spirit of life has set you free in Christ Jesus from the law of sin and death. Do you know what? You know when you're in that midst of that lie kind of circulating and you're judging yourself and you're condemning yourself? There's no life in that, is there? The joy is just taken from you. But the law of the Spirit of life has set you free from that. For God has done what the law, weakened by the flesh, could not do. By sending His Son in the likeness of sinful flesh, and for sin, He condemned sin in the flesh. He condemned that lie. It has no power. In order that the righteous requirement of the law might be fulfilled in us, who walk not according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. Go ahead and dim the lights, if you don't mind. Soul care workers, if you want to come up here. Where are you right now? I mean, how are you doing with this? You struggling? I get that. I honestly can say I get that. These are teammates. They're here for you. They can help remind you of the freedom you have. I know there's so much going on in your life this week. And Satan wants to do nothing more than use that pain and that frustration to begin injecting lies. And sometimes we need each other to remind ourselves of the truth, that there is no condemnation. So I encourage you, if you need prayer, be it something big, be it something small, come up and use our soul care workers who want to pray with you.